Good evening. We are on Yud Tes Amud Aleph. And just to sort of give us a little bit of a framework here, which is important because we're going to be switching things up a little bit, go back to the Mishnah on Yud Ches Amud Aleph. The Mishnah on Yud Ches Amud Aleph says, it's the second Mishnah, the Mishnah near the bottom of the page, Hashochet mitoch hataba'as v'shir ba mole hachut al pnei kula shchitaso kshera. That's the position of the rabbis, that it seems the entire shchita needs to be within the tabas gedola. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Yehuda omer male chut al pnei ruba. Right, that if there is rove that is within the tabas gedola, that should be sufficient. So on the one hand, we have thought up until now that this Mishnah was relatively simple to understand. In other words, the Chachamim said all of the shechita has to be inside the tabas gedola. And Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda disagreed and said, no, as long as the rove of the shechita is within the tabas gedola, it's good. And some of the shechita can be outside of the tabas gedola, and it would still be good, as long as it was after the rove. That's how we understood the Mishnah, and that seems to be relatively straightforward, okay? Now, back to where we are today, Yud Tes Amud Aleph. We're on 19A2. 19A2, we began actually last week because we're going to see that we're not so sure what the machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, what the machlokes is about. All right? We think, what we've learned up until now, we think it's about we think it's about the case where you shecht through rove, which is referred to as 2/3. You shecht through rove, and then you're magrim, and then you slant the cut upwards, outside of the tabas gedola. That's the way we understood the Mishnah. Right. And is that necessarily the way that the Mishnah is to be understood? So that seems to be the subject of a debate. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Asi. You have it? We're right literally at the top of the gray bar on 19A2. Machlokes b'sheshachat shnei shlish v'higrim shlish. Okay? No chiddush there. What's the machlokes in the Mishnah? You got it, Bart? Go to 19A2. Are you 19A2? Okay, so you see where the gray bar starts? Right, that's correct, right there, okay? So that's precisely what we've been learning up until now, which is the position of Rav Huna Amar Rav Asi, that what is this machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi about? The machlokes is b'sheshachat shnei shlish, you shechted 2/3 in the tabas gedola, v'higrim shlish, and then you went up for the last third. The Rabbanan Savre, the Rabbanan hold Kula Shchita Ba'inan B'Tabas Gedola. The Rabbanan hold the entire Shchita needs to be in the Tabas Gedola. V'Rebbi Yossi, V'Rebbi Yehuda Savar Rubo Kikulo Aval. So based on that, so that's the machlokus, the way that we understood it, right? Right. Aval Higrim Shlish. But what about the following case? Aval higrim shlish. The first shlish started outside, above. In other words, he cut up here above the tabas gedola, and then came down into the tabas gedola. Higrim shlish, v'shachat shnei shlish. Is there a machlokas in such a case? Yes. Higrim shlish, v'shachat shnei shlish. What do the rabbis say? No good. Why?
Because you started in not in the...
The rabbis require what?
The entire thing in the
The rabbis require everything in the tabas gedola. And here, Higrim Shlish, the first third is outside. So the rabbis don't care that the second third and the third third are inside. If you're out for any of it, according to the way we are understanding this right now, it's no good. What about Rebbe Yossi? What would Rebbe Yossi say?
So since you get to 50% before, the way we were interpreting it before, one would think that since you get to 50% and it's not properly shechted, the justification for allowing hagrama would not be there, right? In other words, where you get the first rove inside, so you say rubo kakulo and it's all kosher, but now rubo kakulo
Is the back end.
the rove.
So what's wrong with that?
The rove that you got originally, though, the part that was the halachic death of the animal.
Oh, that's the nakuda, right? That right there is the nakuda. Okay, it really has nothing
was
to.
a novella,
It really has nothing to do with rove.
Right.
In other words, this case where seemingly everyone agrees, we understand why the Chachamim, why the Rabbanan would say it's puzzle. But why would Reb Yossi say it's puzzle? Because there's still a rove inside the Tabas Gedola, right? Enachinami, the first third is outside of the Tabas Gedola, but the remaining 2/3, which is a rove, is inside the Tabas Gedola. Why wouldn't we say Rubo Kakulo according to Rebbe Yossi? Because Rebbe Yossi holds not just Rubo Kakulo, whereas Rebbe Yossi holds, yes, it's true, I require rove to be in the Makom Hashchita, within the Tabas Gedola. But I have another requirement, and what is that requirement? That requirement is that at the moment when the animal's life ends, my knife has to be in the Makom Shchita.
Right.
And when does the animal's life end halachically?
when you have rove of the same.
Once you get past rove of the veshet.
Yeah.
You get past rove of the veshet, I'm sorry,
Of the similar.
of the kana. You get through rove of the kana, and the animal's life ends. That's the halachic definition of when the animal's life ends. And according to this opinion, when you got to rove, right? In other words, at the point when the animal's life ended, you did not have a good shechita, right?
Right.
You did not have a good shechita. At the moment that the animal's life ended, you had a good shechita. But so let's see that inside. So in the case of in aval higrim shlish v'shachat shnei shlish divrei hakol psula. Everybody agrees it's puzzle. Why? The chinafka chiyusa, because when the animal's life ends, nafka means to go out, right? When the life goes out of the animal, meaning when you get through 50% of the kaneh, ba'inan ruba b'shchita. At that point, what do we require? We require rove to be in the appropriate place. Ruba b'shchita. Veleka. And that's not here. Because at the moment that the animal's life ends, now what is there? 1/3 outside and 1/3 inside.
Right. Or less.
Right.
Right? So there's less than rove inside. So at the moment when the animal's, right, or less. So at the moment when the animal's life ends, there is not halachically rove in the Tabas Gedola, and even Rebbe Yossi would not allow a case like that. Okay? Mm-hmm. This is all assuming that that the machlokes in our Mishnah is about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Right.
Right? If we say the machlokes in our Mishnah is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, okay, so then exactly as we've explained it now. But is that the only possible way to understand our Mishnah? And the Gemara is going to suggest no. There's another possible way to understand our Mishnah, which will give us completely different results. What is that way to understand the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Amar le Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says here to Rav Huna Amar Rav Asi. Rav Chisda says to him, Adarabba, I'm going to tell you that the machlokes in the Mishnah is exactly the opposite. Adarabba, the opposite, fakert. Why? we're going to say, Lema Mar Ifcha, I'm sorry, Amar Le Rav Chisda Adarabba, Lema Mar Ifcha. Say just the opposite, meaning what? What's just the opposite? We said the machlokes was 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. What would be the opposite?
1/3 out.
1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Okay? So here he says, so that's the machlokas of our Mishnah. That's what Rav Chisda is saying. The machlokas of our Mishnah is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Okay? 1/3, first third out, and then 2/3 in. That's the machlokas in our Mishnah. Wait a second, that's not so easy to understand.
But it goes back if you're not in the Makom HaShchita.
Well, hold on, let's see, all right? So, what is the machlokas of our Mishnah according to Rav Chisda? Kishehigrim shlish, the first third is outside of the proper area. It's above the Tabaz Gedola. And then Vishachat Shnei Shlish. And then what? The second third and the third third are within the Tabaz Gedola. So that's what the machlokes is. What's the machlokes in this case? The Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda Sava, Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda says, Midi dahave achatzi kana pagum. In other words, what does Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda say in such a case?
No, because it's.
But wait a second. We have to go back to the Mishnah, right? What does Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda say in the Mishnah? Go back to the Mishnah and look and see what he says in the Mishnah. Okay? What does Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda say? Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda says, Malei chut al pnei ruba. All right?
So if we're interpreting it this backwards way, or this other way,
Okay.
so he says as long as you have malei chut al pnei ruba, so if we're interpreting it this way, maybe he's saying that this is okay.
Well, that's exactly right. Right? Let's look inside. And what is he basing himself on? What is he basing himself on? He's basing himself on the case of the Kana Pagum. We mentioned that last week, the Kana Pagum. What is a Kana Pagum? It's a Kana
That's already been cut?
that has already a cut in it, not from a shochet. From some an animal, a piece of barbed wire, who knows what, right? That there's already a cut, a laceration through the kana,
That's not rove.
but it's not rove. It's not rove. So what's the halacha by a kana pagum? What's the halacha? So says the Gemara that Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda is basing himself on a chatzi kana pagum, which would mean if you have a chatzi kana pagum, according to Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda, how do you machshir this animal? What do you have to do?
See if it lives.
No, we're assuming that it's not a siman
treifa.
treifa. That a chatzi kana pogum, that an animal can live with less than rove of its kana cut.
Oh, so you take this piece and you cut right into the opening. Right?
Good, right? How much?
Well, until you get to rove.
Right? So according to the Gemara, this case of chatzi kana pogum, right? And everybody agrees that there is such a case of chatzi kana pagum. All you have to do, according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, is shecht a drop more. In other words, let's say that the laceration...
If the laceration is in the makom shchita, the beit shchita...
That's what chatzi kana pagum is talking about.
Okay. In that instance, you finish the cut, so to speak.
But there's no shehiyah?
Well, that's...
No, because what are we saying? At the moment of yitzias, at the moment of death,
It's not.
right?
Yeah.
Nafka chiyusa, at the moment of death, there is a maaseh shchita.
Right.
right? Because when does death occur halachically?
go
The
through
minute
rov.
you get to rov.
I guess they're saying there was no shehiyah because the original cut wasn't a maaseh shechita.
Everybody
Right,
agrees
right,
that the
right,
original
right.
cut
So it
was
doesn't
not a
matter,
maaseh
not a
shechita.
shechita.
It happened to be in the makom hashchita, but it wasn't a maaseh shechita. Well, if I'm going to learn from that case, if I'm going to learn from the case of chatzi kana pagum, meaning the way to shech this animal is just to cut a little bit more,
Okay.
then according to Rabbi Yossi but Rabbi Yehuda, does rov of the shechita require a maaseh shechita? In other words, does rov of the cut
No.
require a maaseh shechita?
No.
No, why not?
you're already
Because
there. You started
because
there.
49% of the cut
Is
came
the-
about through a laceration. A laceration is not a maaseh shechita, right?
Right.
49% of the cut came about through a laceration, which is not a shechita,
Made it
right? You added 2%,
and you made it.
right? You added 2%, which when minute you hit 51%, that's considered nafka chiyusa. The animal is halachically dead. The minute you hit 51%. So at that moment, there was a maaseh shechita. But rov of that cut was not a maaseh shechita, right?
Right, no,
Because the first 48% of it happened independent of you.
Yes.
So if that's the svara, so how does that apply to Rebbe Yossi now? Higrim shlish,
So that's
1/3 down and 2/3 across.
So are we saying that the higrim shlish is not a maaseh shechita, that it was by some laceration?
No, you were magrim.
Oh, so they're still saying magrim, but they're saying because
It's the same
What
case.
does Rebbe Yossi require?
Life. For a
In
second.
Chatzi Kana Pagum,
It's
what
gotta
does he
live, it's
require?
gotta live.
as long as the middle third you're saying was in the makom shechita, then he's okay.
Because the way that Rav Chisda is interpreting our machlokes is to say, what's important to Rebbe Yossi, Rebbe Yehuda? At the moment you get to 51%, was it done with maaseh shechita? I don't care what the other, right, 48%, what caused the other 48%. I don't care if it was a laceration or maybe it was a bad maaseh shechita. I don't care. If the moment I get to 51%,
That's interesting.
it is good at that moment. Nafka chiyusa, it's good at that moment. So then I machshir the animal.
Okay.
All right? So according to this, higrim shlish, and then shlish and shlish,
You're okay.
Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would say, good. Right? He would say, as long as ruba is, right, al panei ruba. As long as, right, so what, interestingly here, what would he have to say? Right? So interesting, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would have to say with this animal that in the case of Chatzi Kana Pagum, the entire laceration is within the Makom HaShchita, right? It wasn't done by a Ma'aseh Shchita, but the entire laceration is within the Makom HaShchita. So since the entire laceration is within the Makom HaShchita, all I have to do is 2% more.
Right.
And at that moment, that's nafka chiyusa, which was done by a maaseh shchita. And do I have rov in the makom hashchita? Yes. Rov of my cut is in the makom hashchita now. So according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, all I would have to do to machshir this animal, which is chatzi kana pagum, all I would have to do is put my knife in the laceration and cut another 2%, and everything is good. Because at the moment when life ended for the animal, it was a proper ma'aseh shchita, and the cut is now rov in the makom hashchita.
So in this interpretation, Rabbi Yossi doesn't want to be beyond 50% from the laceration. Right? He needs to be less than 50% in the laceration or in the
We're not talking about, in other words, the case of Chatzi Kana Pogum is clear. Less than 50% is the laceration. And what you're obligated to do is to extend the cut
Right.
50 until you get past Rov. All right? But here, in our case of Higrim Shlish, right? Shlish. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would say it's not sufficient to simply cut from 48% or right 33, right? Higrim Shlish, so that's 33%. So 33% of the cut is outside of the Makom Ashchita. So says Rabbi Yossi, it's not sufficient to just cut from 34% to 51% in the Makom Shchita. Why? That will enable the moment of Nafka Chiyusa to be with the Maaseh Shchita, but what will you not have yet?
Rov.
You won't have Rov in the Makom Shchita. So what do you have to do according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda?
According to Rav Chizda's interpretation.
According to Rav Chisda's interpretation of what this machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi
rest of the
Chia
way.
is,
You have to get a
you have to get a Rov
In the Makom Ashchita.
in the Makom Ashchita. Right, so that's a little bit of a difference between the case of Chatzi Kana Pogum and this case of Shlish. But the reason, what Rav Chisda's reasoning is that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't care how 48% of the cut got there.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So if I don't care how 48% of the cut got there, since I don't care about that, so what would I say? I would say Higrim Shlish, and Shlish would be fine.
Yes.
And so this interpretation by Rav Chizda leaves the Rabbanan the same way.
Correct. The Rabbanan don't change. Because according to the Rabbanan, they require everything to be within the Makom Shchita. And this fits perfectly well in the language. I mean, maybe it's a little bit forced, but go back to the Mishnah, right? And what does it say? Hashochet mitoch hatabas v'shir ba malei hachut al pnei kula shchita so kshera. That's the position of the Rabbanan. That's true here as well, according to Rav Chisda's interpretation. You have to be totally within the Makom, the Tabas Gedola, totally within the Makom Ashchita. If you're not, the Rabbanan say forget about it. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Malei chut al pnei ruba.
But he doesn't get. It's true that he does not. If you could.
He doesn't say it has to be the.
He doesn't say which part.
He doesn't say which rove. He doesn't say the first rove.
Right.
He just says Malei chut al pnei ruba. So Rav Chisda comes right. So Rav Chisda comes along and says, why are we forced to interpret the Mishnah the way we've been interpreting it? In other words, saying that he's talking about the first rove. We can maybe interpret it to say he's talking about the second rove. Not the first rove, but the remainder of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? That's Rav Chisda's. This is how Rav Chisda wants to interpret the Mishnah. So he says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Savar Midi Dehabe Achatzi Kana Pagum, and therefore it's fine. For Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan say? Hasam, in the case of Chatzi Kana Pagum, Hasam Makom Shchita. There, the laceration was what? At least it was in the Makom Shchita. Chatzi Kana Pagum, the laceration is in the Makom Shchita. Right? So, because the Rabbanan also accept the principle of Chatzi Kana Pagum. Let's say that you had an animal that had Chatzi Kana Pagum and you went to the Rabbanan and the Shochet put his knife in the cut and finished cutting the whole thing that way. What would the Rabbanan say? The Rabbanan would say fine. Why would the Rabbanan say fine? Because where was the laceration? The laceration was in Makom Ashchita. Yes, in Achinami it was less than rope. But it was at least in Makom Ashchita. So here, according to the Rabbanan, in the case of Chatzi Kana Pogum, the entire cut is within the Makom Ashchita. And since the entire cut is within the Makom Ashchita, the Rabbanan would say, by Chatzi Kana Pogum, they would say fine. But if you go shlish, the entire cut is not within the Makom Ashchita. So the Rabbanan say it's not the same as Chatzi Kana Pogum. So Rav Chisda has this novel interpretation of the Mishnah. The first interpretation, that's the way we've been explaining the Mishnah. But along comes Rav Chisda and says, who says we have to explain it that way? Because I can explain it exactly the opposite. Who says it has to be shlish? I can explain it to be shlish, and the Rabbanan will still say no good, and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda will still say good. So what's wrong with my interpretation of the Mishnah? Okay. But according to Rav Chisda, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is about shlish, shlish, shlish. Correct? That's what the machlokes is about. Aval, however, shachat shnei shlish v'higrim shlish. If you shechted shlish, shlish, and then shlish, what's the halacha? Divrei hakol ksheira. All right? Divrei hakol ksheira. It's an interesting difference here. According to Rav Chisda, if you went shlish, 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 what would the halacha be?
He says even Chachamim say that's okay.
Even the Chachamim would say that's okay. Why? Divrei hakol ksheira. The Hasnan, because the rabbis would embrace the belief of Rubo Shel Echad Kamohu. In other words, the rabbis would also embrace the position of Rov. And here, for the rabbis, Rov of the cut was, the first part of the Rov of the cut was within the Makom HaShrita. So depending upon how you interpret this machlokes, you're going to come up with two completely different halachos. If you interpret the machlokes of the Mishnah to be shlish, 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 so then you have Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda saying good, and the Rabbanan saying not good.
Right.
So doesn't this position require Rav Chisda to say that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is rejecting the concept of the life goes out at 50%, 50.1%.
Why? Because it's happening in both cases?
Well, but in the case of the first third being outside of the Makom HaShrita, then when you get to 50%, you haven't done Rov in the Makom HaShrita, and this animal should be dead.
So the answer to that is correct. What we
I
have,
thought the Rov has to be in...
yeah, but what Natan is asking is, what he's suggesting is correct, that depending upon how you understand the position of Rav Yossi, in other words, does he require at the point of nafka chiyusa, does he require a rov to be a good shchita, right?
Right.
Or does he simply require at the moment of rov it be a good shchita?
See,
that is the fundamental difference between these two views.
Mm-hmm. We're outside the Makom HaShrita, right? So, but have we touched the Simanim yet? That's the correct. Like with the.
What do you mean if you touch the siman?
So we're outside the Makom HaShrita, so we start up or whatever, right? So we start up. I guess you were in the Torah, you're not there to count the 50%, so you have the 1/3 and the 2/3.
Right, 1/3 is that first 33% is not. It's not a maaseh shchita, and it's not in the makom.
So then the animal's not going to die.
Nobody says right. That
so
no.
Wait, but it is a maaseh shchita in the example of the Mishnah.
Which, according to whose interpretation?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but let's say Rav Chisda's interpretation. Okay.
Remember, Rav Chisda's case is shlish, shlish, shlish.
Right, and that first shlish is by the shochet. The shochet cuts.
The shochet cuts that.
And he messes it up.
He's too high.
He's too high. He messes it up.
And he comes in.
And he comes in for the second third.
But we're not. But it really hasn't started until the second.
So is that really? So he's saying.
So Rav Chisda is saying, as long as when he hits that 51%,
you're in the makom.
You're in the makom hashrita and you have a maaseh shchita.
It's okay.
It's good. I don't care that the entire 50% is a maaseh shchita. I don't care about that.
Right.
And how does he learn that? He learns it from the case of Chatzi Kanapogum. In Chatzi Kanapogum, you have 48%, which is not a makom, which is not a maaseh shchita.
But it's in the makom shchita.
Who cares about that? The Rabbanan care about that. But Rabbi Yossi doesn't care about that, according to Rav Chisda.
Right.
Right, but then I guess what Bart is positing is that, which is a little different than what I was saying, but Bart is suggesting that under Rav Chizda's interpretation of Rabbi Yossi, he still says 50% is halachic debt,
Right.
but only 50% within the makom shchita.
Which is consistent with.
No,
No,
you
it's
can't
not
say that.
No, you're right. You can't.
You can't say that.
You're right.
Everybody agrees, because remember, when you are cutting, when you're being magrim, you are still cutting the kaneh,
Right, it's just the,
right?
the top.
You're just not cutting the kaneh in the makom shchita.
But we don't view that as halachic death yet.
No, but we do. In other words, we do. That's what Rav Chisda is saying. Rav Chisda is saying once 51% of the kaneh is cut, I don't care if all 50,
If 49 of it is outside.
I don't care if 49 of it is outside, as long as when you get to 51, and whenever you get to 51,
You're in the makom.
whenever you get to 51, that is nafka chiyusa of the animal. So for instance, if you cut above the tabas gedola, 51%, let's say you cut 50.
isn't that hagrama?
Wait a second. Let's say yes, correct. Let's say you cut 51%. You cut 51% above the tabas gedola. There's no way to fix it.
Right.
Right? If you cut 50, because at the moment of nafka chiyusa,
It's outside.
you are outside the makom
But
ashchita.
if I
You still cut 51% of the kana. The animal is still considered halachically dead.
Okay, that's what.
But you can't fix it.
Okay. Okay.
So in Rav Chizda's example,
I understand.
in
In Rav Chisda's understanding of the machlokas of the Mishnah.
Right, in Rav Chizda's understanding of the machloket of the Mishnah, could you do a third out, a third in, and then a third out again? Because
that
you're
would be really.
because you're still at 51% at the moment of the
Hold on. Well,
whatever.
we'll see. As of right now, the answer is no. Why?
Well, Rav Yossi seems to say you need a majority.
Because Rav Yosei seems to be saying, according to this, that you need two things. You need, at the moment of nafka chiyusa, to be in the right place, and you also need at least a rove in the right place.
Yes.
Right? So according to this, what are we saying? According to this opinion, your case of shlish, shlish, shlish
is no good
is not good
under Rav Chizda's.
under Rav Chisda's interpretation of the Mishnah. What's interesting is that probably from a practical standpoint, shlish, shlish, shlish is no. I would say just the opposite. In other words, a person is literally cutting in a U.
Circle.
In a U.
Yeah.
So, if he's already not cutting straight, it's unusual for him to cut down and then straight.
Right.
It would make sense he would cut, sort of
curve.
like in a curve.
There's actually people who specifically do cut in a curve.
But that's
on
different.
the not on the horizontal, but on the vertical.
That's-
No, not on the vertical, but on
But
the
you're in
horizontal.
the makom shvita the whole.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Okay, so we'll
So,
come.
but-
So
So
you're
how
correct.
does-
So far you're
How
correct.
does Rav Chisda get around the whole Hagrama issue?
Rav Chisda says, according to Rav Chisda, the definition of hagrama is if 51% of the cut is outside of the makom ashchita.
Oh, so he doesn't care where the 49% is. The 49% could be from here.
Well, then you have no way. Of
No,
getting into the
down
makom.
here is not a. Let's.
You gotta get. I mean, realistically. So if you're in the makom, he says if you come up here, and then you do it some sort of crazy angle, you're okay. As long as you finish in the makom.
As long as you get over the 50% hurdle in the makom shchita, and
That's his
then
position.
complete the rest of the cut in the makom.
So I mean, this is not realistic because we're dealing with measurements that are not at all practical. But we'll just play it out just because we're learning the principle from it. I go 33% from somewhere above the tabas gedola to the top of the tabas gedola. That's my 33%. Then, so it's really not like this. It's really this, which brings me to the top of the Tabas Gedola. And then I continue in at the angle, right, for another 33%. Right? So
That's in the tabak.
that second 33% is in the Makom Hashrita. So at the moment that the nafka chiyusa of the animal, which is 51%,
It's fine.
right? I have 33% outside, and I have 18% inside, right? Boom, nafka chiyusa. But since I only have 18% inside, what do I have to do?
Finish.
I have to finish the cut, because if I finish the cut, 18 and 33 will give me 51% inside the Makom Hashrita. That's what I have to do according to Rabbi Yossi. This is Rav Chista's understanding of it.
Right.
Now, I don't want you, listen, it would be inaccurate to say that at first glance, we would think the Mishnah is talking about this machlokes the way Rav Chista understands it. That's not true.
Right.
At first glance, we would say that the Mishnah is talking about the machlokes the way that we brought it down at the very beginning, right? In the name of Rav Huna. Right? That makes a lot more sense. That's the way we started interpreting it, because it's more mistaber. But what the Gemara is telling us is
Maybe not.
Maybe not. At least we have to entertain the possibility that Rav Chista's interpretation is a correct interpretation.
Sure. Okay.
Right? And there's going to be a nafka mina lahalacha between Rav Huna's interpretation and Rav Chista's interpretation.
And I mean, my guess is that it's coming to this point of, the halachic death, the moment of halachic death.
Okay, so let's see.
Okay.
All right, so you understand the two possible ways to interpret the machlokes in the Mishnah. Rav Huna's way of interpreting the machlokes in the Mishnah, and Rav Chista's way of interpreting the machlokes in the Mishnah. Obviously, there's significant differences in how they understand Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, but there's also differences in how they understand the Rabbanan. Because according to Rav Huna, the Rabbanan meant they want the entirety to be in the Makom HaShrita. According to Rav Chista, the Rabbanan only require rov in the Makom HaShrita. Okay, so there's a major difference there. Okay,
The first rov.
the first rov, correct. The first rov,
yeah.
correct. Okay, so Amar le Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says to Rav Chista, I think he's saying it to Rav Chista. Amar le Rav Yosef, man nema lan dehahu ruba dehosam lav Rebbe Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda ksani la. All right?
Again.
Okay, so we learned that rov, right, that the principle of rov, when it comes to shchita, is sufficient. But who is the one who says that? Who's the one who says rov when it comes? Because remember, according to Rav Chista, what did the Rabbanan say about shlish, shlish, shlish?
No good.
Right? According to Rav Chista, the Rabbanan say no good. What did the Rabbanan say about shlish, shlish, shlish according to Rav Chista?
Good.
They say good. Why?
Because you had 51%.
Because you have the principle of rov.
Yeah.
Rov of the
And
shchita
after that doesn't
was good,
matter.
and after that it doesn't matter, right? Because we go by the principle of rov specifically here by shchita. Says Rav Yosef, what are you talking about? Right? Maybe man nemalan. Who says to us, Tehahu ruba dehasam lav Rebbe Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda tanila? Who's saying that the rov that we're over there, right? The rov by shchita. Who is saying that the rov by shchita is not just the opinion of Rebbe Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda? In other words, you Rav Chista are saying that that this principle of rov by shchita, the Rabbanan also accept that principle, right? Because that's Rav Chista said that, right? In other words, Rav Chista's whole interpretation of the machlokes rests on the Rabbanan agreeing that rove is sufficient,
Right.
right? Because he's got to come up with a case,
That's our fact.
right?
That's our
Right. So Rav Chisda's whole interpretation of the machlokes is based on,
Rov.
among other things, saying that the Rabbanan are maskim that rove is sufficient. The first rove is sufficient. So along comes Rabbi
Yosef.
Along comes Rabbi Yosef, and he says to Rav Chisda, who says that this concept of rove over there by Shchita is not only Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda. In other words, maybe it really is only Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda. Dilma Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda ksanila. In other words, maybe this whole principle of rove by Shchita is taught only according to Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda. In other words, who gives you the right, Rav Chisda, to say that this principle of rove, that once rove is cut in the makom hashchita, meaning
it's
shlish, who gives you the right to say the Rabbanan would say it's good, that's sufficient because rove was there? Maybe the principle of rove by shchita seems to be only taught by Rebbe Yossi. Maybe only Rebbe Yossi holds by rove of shchita, and the Rabbanan would not hold by rove of shchita. Right? That's what. Right? Do you see how Rav Yosef's question is a question against Rav Chisda?
Mm-hmm.
So Amar le Abaye. So Abaye says now to Rav Yosef, wait a second. How can you ask that question? How can you even suggest that rove was only according to Rav Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda? Says Abaye, Atu kol rube da alma Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda ksani lu? Are you going to suggest, says Abaye, that every rove in the Torah, right? Not every rove in the Torah, but every case of rove is only workable according to Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda? Are you suggesting that the concept of rove is a Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda concept? How could you possibly say that? We know that that's not true. Right? We know that there are plenty of times where the Rabbanan rely on rove. So how could you possibly even suggest that rove is a Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda concept? So Amar Le, so Rabbi Yosef will answer Abaye and he'll say to him, Ana ruba de shchita kamina, de shamana luhu de pligi. What am I going to say?
the pligi is
Pligi means that they disagree.
Okay.
In other words, what was Rav Yosef's question based on? Abaye thought that Rav Yosef's question was based on attributing the concept of rove solely to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Abaye thought. And Abaye says to Rav Yosef, how could you possibly say that? How can you possibly say that rove is only a Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda concept? Because there are plenty of places where the Rabbanan rely on rove.
right.
That's what Abaye's question to Rav Yosef was. So Rav Yosef comes back and says to Abaye, no, you misunderstood my question. I'm not saying that rove is only a Rav Yosef Rabbi Yehuda concept. I'm saying that rove in the case of shchita, because here there's a real machlokas, so maybe rove in the case of shchita is only a Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda concept. That the rabbis hold by rove in other places, but they don't hold by rove but when it comes to shchita. And since they don't hold by rove when it comes to shchita, then Rav Chisda's case doesn't work out. Right? Then Rav Chisda's explanation of the machlokes doesn't work out, and we're left only with Rav Huna's explanation of the machlokes.
Isn't rove? It's not a Rabbanan, isn't it? There, right? Isn't it from the oral?
Correct. The concept, the rabbis agree that everywhere else, rove works. They just don't agree that rove works by shchita.
Well, that's Rav Yosef's question.
That's his question. But I thought
That's his right. That's his.
Always felt like I thought it was like the right that was rove was okay. That's it. That's a sign that
Now the truth is, we paskin based on rove, obviously.
right.
But we paskin based on
But
Rov.
I don't
So in
remember
other
the
words,
source of where
there's no question, or you could say to me, what are you talking about? What do you tell me the rabbis don't rely on Rov when it comes to Shechita? The rabbis, of course, rely on Rov when it comes to Shechita.
So then
We
how could
paskin that way. So what is he saying?
Yeah, I don't
So,
understand that.
so the difference would be, in order to understand the question, the rabbis for sure agree on Rov when it comes to Shechita, if the Shechita would stop after Rov.
Okay.
When the Shechita stops after Rov and doesn't go anywhere else,
Okay.
the guy pulls his knife out,
Right.
then the rabbis would agree that's sufficient.
Okay, but if he keeps
Because the rabbis agree that Rov works. That's how we paskin. You only have to cut Rov of the simanim. Okay? What Rav Yosef is saying is that the Rov on which
guys
Rabbi
are-
Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is relying is where you did 2/3 inside and then you did a third outside. So Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, once I hit Rov, I don't care what happens.
they're saying
So the Chachamim could be saying,
That's
we
still-
disagree with that.
right.
Right? We accept the principle of once you hit Rov, the animal is considered halachically dead.
But you can't cut anymore.
But you can't cut, but if you go now outside, we're not going to rely on that.
I
Okay? Okay. We'll stop here for today.
That's it's tricky.
Okay?
Thank you.